And Barb, I think that's why this conversation matters so much because when women begin speaking differently, when they start receiving differently, when they start leading differently, and they start taking up space differently, they don't just change themselves. They give other women permission to see another option. Welcome to Smart Women Talking, thoughtful conversations about work, life, leadership, and everything in between. I'm Polly Meyer,
And I'm Barbara Zuleger.
and each week we bring you honest conversations, smart perspectives, and ideas that you can actually use. So this week we talk about the confidence gap. So, what if the confidence gap isn't about confidence at all? What if it's about a pattern, one that was built slowly, quietly, over years of messages that told you to take up less space? So, first, before we dive in, let's start with a working definition of the confidence gap. So, the confidence gap refers to the difference between what you believe you're truly capable of and what you want to achieve. Now, that confidence gap is often what holds people back from opportunities, even if they're well qualified. Now, we've both heard it 100 times. Just be more confident. Barb, why is this the most unhelpful thing that you can say to a woman who is already working incredibly hard?
It's definitely a trigger for me. I think it's when you tell me that, or I hear somebody say, oh, she just needs to be more confident. When someone says that, the first thing that comes to mind for me is I'm not appearing confident. And if I'm not appearing confident, oh, I must not be confident in this. So it's all happens like this, right? It's that instantaneous reaction I have of, well, they don't see me as confident in this versus it's not the old fake it to make it because there's a place for that, but this is not what that is about. It's about just being able to go with the flow of what you know and what you have within you. And as soon as somebody tells you to be more confident, they've pointed out a gap.
Right, because when we hear that, it's like we ask ourselves, what does be more confident even mean? Are we talking about being brave? Are we talking about using more powerful body language, winging it, relying on our past wins as a ground to stand on? Does it mean start bulldozing people at the table? Like you said, faking it till we make it? I don't think any of those are helpful
I would
without,
agree.
as you said, a deep belief in oneself.
Yes. And the other thing is, when we think about the term confidence, you can't be confident, truly confident in something you've never done. And yet, to get to new places, we have to do things we haven't done before. So
Mhm.
the confidence gap, it's a real thing. It's I think about how we take it on, right? I do have a confidence gap in whether I can do this next step. And that's okay because I can rely on the confidence I have from having done new things in the past.
Do you think that the confidence gap is something that we're born with or something that is installed in us?
I think we are conditioned especially in today's society, the society you and I have both grown up in. And that's a whole nother conversation. In fact, science tells us that by age 6, girls are more likely to see themselves as less than boys. Age 6.
Well,
Whether
yeah,
it's grades or abilities, it's a programming thing.
I agree. All of those are messages. There's spoken, there's unspoken. They teach girls to be agreeable, helpful, accommodating, careful, not to take up too much space.
Yes.
And I think that, over time, women learn that being bold, being assertive can feel risky, speaking up can feel uncomfortable, asking for more can feel selfish. Through all of that and what you shared, we learn to second guess ourselves. We learn to soften our opinions. We learn to wait until we feel more ready, more qualified, more certain. And so I really think that what the confidence gap is often years of messaging around who we are allowed to be and what happens to us when we step outside of that.
Hmm. Well, I think most of us have heard the statistic that women will apply for a job that they are 110% qualified for and nothing less. Men will apply for a position that they're 60% qualified for because they feel confident that they're capable of learning the rest of it before anyone knows they didn't know it in the first place. That's my guess. Um, but there's a reality to that. I do a lot of interviewing when I'm helping clients hire, and I see a lot of that. I see men showing up with really less than resumes. You wouldn't know it in their confidence in an interview, where women
Hmm.
are trying to prove what they've already accomplished through their interview. I mean, obviously, that's a generalization, but I do see that consistently.
Uh-huh.
So it is learned. It's conditioned in how in schools, it's conditioned in sports, it's conditioned in our family.
And, even with that conditioning, I think that from the outside, especially with the women that I work with, high performing women often look incredibly confident. They're leading teams, they're raising families, they're managing careers, they're showing up for everybody else. But what people don't see is how exhausting it can be to always look composed while constantly questioning yourself internally.
So, what do you see? You work a lot with high performing women. What does that self doubt show up? How do you see that? I mean, how does it show up even when they're putting on that I'm very capable, I can do it all kind of?
Hmm. Self doubt isn't always loud. That's one thing. Sometimes it's simply staying quiet in a meeting when you have something to say, playing smaller than you need to, convincing yourself that everyone else knows something that you don't. Boy, from the boards that I have worked with, I can tell you that everybody feels the exact same way in those meetings. Everybody has doubt. The tricky thing about self doubt, though, is that it rarely announces itself. It often disguises itself as perfectionism, over
Okay.
preparing, staying quiet in a meeting, being endlessly helpful, avoiding visibility, waiting until you're ready. So, from the outside, a high performing woman can look very composed. But inside, she's still negotiating whether she belongs there in that room. So that's what it looks like.
That's interesting because we do see a lot of women that we idolize. And sometimes it's that comparison piece as well, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But it's comparing ourselves to other people. There's a difference between having genuine humility and intentionally shrinking ourselves. How do you balance that? How do you tell that apart for yourself? When are you holding back versus being generous through humility?
That's a good question. I think genuine humility is grounded in truth. It says, I don't need to dominate the room to know that I belong in this room. Humility allows you to be open, curious, generous, and collaborative without pretending that you don't have something valuable to contribute. Whereas shrinking, shrinking is when you edit yourself down to keep other people in the room comfortable. Shrinking is when you know you have something to say, but you soften it so much that the point gets lost, or you wait so long to speak that the moment passes. Or you give away credit too quickly because receiving that credit feels uncomfortable. So the way I often tell the difference between humility and shrinking is this. Humility leaves you with self respect. Shrinking usually leaves you with that feeling of resentment or regret.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Humility says, I'm part of something bigger than me. And shrinking says, I better not be too much in this room. And the sad part is, I think a lot of women have been rewarded for shrinking and calling it humility. We're praised for being agreeable, easy to work with, low maintenance, gracious, supportive. Now, these are all beautiful qualities when they come from strength, but when they come from fear, they can quietly train us to disappear.
Well, and I think I love the way you define humility and shrinking, with one is a very collaborative and you feel like you're part of a team, where the other, it's actually how you feel on the inside. It may not look any different to those on around you if they don't, especially if they don't know you well. Um, but it does create resentment. And okay, maybe it's just me, but I know that for myself in those situations, I will think, I have the answer to that, but I'm not sharing it because you're not listening to me anyway. A little bit of spite in there. And that can build on itself pretty quickly. And then it becomes co- um, confidence and collaboration becomes resistance and not sharing what I have to offer. And that doesn't serve anyone, right? Every one of us has something that someone else around us needs. And if we're not sharing at our top level, when sharing what we know, what we feel, what we see, then we're not benefiting those around us either. So it's kind of like we go from the collaboration of showing some humility, which is a good thing, to feeling resentful that you're not listening, and then we don't share any of it. And I don't think that, obviously, that doesn't, it's not just about my confidence level. It doesn't benefit anyone around me then,
True. I
right?
think about this from my years as a professional actor when I was a commercial actor.
Mhm.
Because in an audition room, you learn very quickly that playing small does not make anybody in that room comfortable. It just makes you less memorable. You can be warm and kind and collaborative and still bring a clear point of view. And I think that's true leadership too. The room doesn't need you to vanish. The room needs you to arrive.
Like that.
I'm I'm curious. So in your coaching, what's the moment you most often see confidence collapse? Like, is there a trigger that shows up repeatedly? Because I see this in my work, but I'm curious as to where it shows up in yours.
Confidence, I see the most obvious and obvious to my clients that they're losing that confidence is when they start to create comparisons. When they start to look at every other business around them and think, yes, but they're doing this and they're hiring these people or they're offering this, or and then they're saying, but I'm not. I'm just stuck right where I am. Right. So then they lack that confidence to try anything new or to take the risks that are essential to run any small business. Right. And the secret is there's no, and you work with powerful women, I work with businesses. And I think there's a similarity here. No business is as strong or as perfect on the inside as it appears on the outside, right? And that's a confidence piece, even for a business, not just an individual. You want your business to appear strong and confident. You want people to trust that you can give them what you're telling them you're going to give them and that you're going to be there tomorrow. And when people start to compare where their business is at compared to where they think somebody else's is, small business owners, entrepreneurs take that very personally. And then they see themselves as less than. And then they do start to shrink. It's like, oh, I can't do that because I'm not confident where I'm going to be a year from now. Well, let's decide where you're going to be a year from now and figure out how to get there.
So it sounds like the comparison trap is directly linked to the confidence gap.
Absolutely. In my world, it definitely is. I think it's true everywhere. I mean, you think about, again, societal, when we go back to high school, oh God, thank God we don't ever have to do that, right? But when we go back and we think about those years, I mean, who were the people that were literally put on a pedestal? It was the really good athletes and the girls who were active in everything. And if you weren't one of those few chosen, that was a hit to confidence at that level. We carry that with us unless we're intentional about finding a way to get beyond that. So we talk about confidence and we hear all the time the imposter syndrome. Do you think that's real or is it just a label that we give something?
It's a good question. I think the experience is real. The label, I think, might be a little too broad. When women say that they have imposter syndrome, what they usually mean is, I don't feel as confident as people think I am. Or they think, I'm afraid they're going to find out that I don't know enough. Or they think, I'm not sure I deserve to be here, and they might figure it out as well. And that feeling is very real, right?
Yes.
But when we call it imposter syndrome, we sometimes make it sound like it's a personal flaw, when often it's a very specific response to a very specific environment. Because sometimes it's not imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's being new. Sometimes it's being under supported. Sometimes it's being in a room when nobody has taught you the unwritten rules. Sometimes it's being the only woman, the youngest woman, the only person from your background, or the one who had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. Sometimes what we call imposter syndrome is actually a lack of evidence collection. Women achieve something, but they don't metabolize it. They move, we talked about this last time, they
Yes.
move on so fast that their identity never catches up with their resume. So instead of saying, I have imposter syndrome, I would rather ask, what exactly am I doubting? What evidence am I ignoring? What room am I in? What skill is missing? What story am I telling myself? Asking those questions will make this solvable. But if we keep it vague by feeling that, but not actually asking ourselves those questions, the imposter syndrome stays powerful. If we get specific, then I think that we can work with it.
I definitely like the component of asking questions because when we can clarify a question, we can find the answer, right? I mean, and even in a situation like this, why am I feeling like I'm the imposter here? Why am I feeling like I can't speak up? Because I don't have absolute positive proof in everything I'm going to say. What I have is my experience tells me this is where we should be looking now, or whatever that might be. Amy Edmondson from Harvard Review said it's a rational response to being underestimated, not a personal disorder. And women are often underestimated, especially if there aren't a lot of women in the boardroom or in, the leadership roles. And because we've seen that for so many years, especially, women who have been through years of being in a career, it kind of reinforces that imposter syndrome. Well, who am I to be the leader in this role when nobody else who looks like me has done this? And that can mean a whole lot of things, not just women. That doesn't mean we don't have the experience and skills and the ability to do the job. We have to step into it and say, yes, we can. We can do this, whatever this is. I think being able to identify it with a question for ourselves. Why am I feeling that way? Do I really not know what's going on here? And sometimes, and this is an aside from the thread we're on right now, sometimes when that is the answer that we're just not really sure what's going on, a lot of other people in the room may be feeling the same way. And they may need somebody to step back and say, I'm not really sure the path we're going on here. Can we just take a step back and can you explain this to me again? Right. And that takes confidence to be able to admit you don't know everything that they're discussing or everything that's going on. And just asking that question, again, that's back to, from my perspective, kind of the same humility trend of, okay, now we're all back on the same level playing field,
Mhm.
right? So it's not a personality. It's not a this is who I am. We kind of put on our own robe, right? That says this is who I am today. This is how I'm showing up. In fact, um, I have had clients where one of the things that we have done for them is given them, for example, one that was in a medical setting, excellent with their patients, really, really good. But when it came to walking into their office and doing the business side of their business, total lack of confidence that they were ever able to do it. And yet they had everything they needed to do it. It wasn't overly complicated. They're a very intelligent person. So we simply had this particular owner take off their lab coat after they'd seen patients and put on a blazer that to them made them feel confident.
Brilliant.
And just making that shift because they knew they were good with their patients, but they were struggling from the business side of their business. So it is a program. It's not a personality trait. And with a program, we can find a way to rewire our brains, right? And that is one way to do it is a physical gesture. I know speakers who will wear the same pair of heels or the same watch every time they're going to go on stage and speak. So I think that that's a piece of it too. What does that mean to you that it's not a personality type? Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I do believe it's not a personality trait. I think that I think that we learn it, right? I I think girls in particular learn self-doubt in 1,000 tiny ways. Often it's not in one big dramatic moment, it's the accumulation of messages. You brought up high school. How many of us are still scarred from our high school years, right? Be nice, don't be bossy, don't you brag, don't get too big for your britches, don't be
Oh,
too
yes.
loud, don't make people uncomfortable, be helpful, be grateful, be pretty but not vain, be smart but don't you be intimidating, be successful but don't act like you know it, right? For women, that's a very narrow path for us to
Oh,
walk.
yes.
And girls start learning early that approval often comes from being pleasing, agreeable, emotionally aware of everybody else. And again, those are not bad qualities. But when they become the price of belonging, they can create a lifelong habit of self monitoring. In fact, Dr. Kyra brought this up in our last episode.
Mhm.
So we carry that then into our schools, our friendships, our relationships, our work, our leadership. We start asking, how am I coming across in this moment before we ask, what value do I bring? Or what do I believe? We start managing perception before we trust our own perspective. I also think, this is a big one, I also think that women learn self doubt from watching other women because we see women apologizing before they speak. We see women deflecting compliments. We see women doing extraordinary things and then minimize it. Minimize it.
Yes.
We
Mhm.
observe and we absorb that. So the programming doesn't always get installed in our childhood or through criticism. Sometimes it gets installed through modeling others. And Barb, I think that's why this conversation matters so much because when women begin speaking differently, when they start receiving differently, when they start leading differently, and they start taking up space differently, they don't just change themselves. They give other women permission to see another option?
Yeah, like I know one of my aha moments around this point came a few years ago when I was struggling to market myself as the expert that I know I am. Do I know everything? No. And again, now I'm softening it, right? There we go. So that's a piece of it. But that made me more humility. We'll go back to that. But what I realized, all those things you listed that women are taught as children, that this is the path you walk. What I walked away from that with, and I didn't realize it till I did some deep dives into why I was struggling with marketing, is don't call attention to yourself.
Hmm.
If you're really that good, if you're really that good an athlete or an actor or a student or a parent, others will notice you and they will say something. And if they're not noticing, then you're really not quite that good. But don't call attention to yourself. It's hard for my business owners to market their businesses that are an extension of themselves in a lot of ways, if that's what they believe. The other side of that is you have something. We all have something that somebody else needs. And if we're not sharing what we do have, and that's where I see the difference for women who have done that work of figuring out what is holding me back in this realm, is they realize that even if they don't have everything and they don't know everything and they don't, they're not always that perfectly polished outside appearance, they still have something very important to offer others around them.
So that leads me to another question. What's the difference between a woman who has done the work on this and one who hasn't? For example, how does how does it show up in how they lead? How does it show up in how they speak? How does it show up in how they make decisions?
I would start from my perspective, the people I work with the leading and the decision making. Women who have done this work, they definitely can show up actually in a calmer place because they don't feel like they have to bring a huge amount of energy to every situation to convince others that they know what they're talking about. They can simply state, this is the decision. This is where we're going for the next step. This is what we need from you. Are you ready to, can you do that? What do you need from me to be able to perform at that level? So it's more of that collaborative leadership as well as having the confidence, the resilience to hold on to their decision they have made until or unless something else comes up that helps them go a slightly different direction. So, two things that I see. Number one, they're able to make decisions quicker. They're also able to let go of decisions when evidence proves that they should change their direction. Women
I'd say
who, go ahead.
one more thing that you brought up though was how they speak, because you brought clarity in
Yes.
your messaging when you were demonstrating what it sounds like.
Yes. Speaking is how they lead. That's the communication and leadership are right. Just those are so closely entwined. They are one and the same. And having that tone and that solidness to how they're speaking doesn't mean there's no room for other information. It means this is my decision and this is where we're going because that's my role. This is my responsibility to make these decisions. And I'm open to listening to you. Those who struggle with this are often triggered by anybody questioning their decisions. Where a business owner, a leader who can make a decision and then have conversations with the others on their team who may not agree with that decision without giving in unless there's solid evidence that they should. Um, that takes confidence. It takes a, I'm going to go with what I believe we should be doing today. And I'm not going to acquiesce simply because somebody didn't agree with me.
Hmm. To build on that, I would also say that a woman who's done the work, that doesn't mean that she's free from self-doubt. I
Absolutely.
that's important to know. She might not seem like she has doubt, but she still has human moments. She still gets nervous. She still questions things, but the difference is that
Absolutely.
doubt no longer gets to drive the car, right? It might be in the passenger seat, but that doubt is not holding the wheel or putting the foot on the brakes.
Women who are truly confident often will welcome more contradiction and more conversation around their decision. When a woman makes a decision that she's not feeling confident in, or she's not confident in her position within an organization, she is more likely to defend it with that pitchfork or something, right? Because she doesn't want anyone to see behind that, oh, but I'm supposed to show up and know it all. And that's kind of an old form of leadership that I work with a lot of my women business owners on to overcome that, because it's not an effective form of leadership for most of our team members in today's world. We don't want to be led by somebody who is saying it's my way or the highway. We want to be led by somebody who says, this is where we're all going together. Here's how we're going to get there. Let's see what we learn along the way.
So what I'm hearing from you is that a woman who has done the work still prepares, still cares, still wants to do well, but she no longer requires total certainty before she moves. And I think that's a
Right.
major shift.
And she no longer requires total obedience to what she asks of her team, because there's open for conversation about. Now, it doesn't mean we debate everything. There are certain non-negotiables in every organization. But a woman who's done the work and has that inner confidence is open to discussion a- about topics that may this person they're speaking to may not agree with them on. And I think, there's a whole nother piece of that that goes into beyond business and beyond women in leadership roles in, bigger society of politics, of community, of, you know, nonprofit organizations. We want people who are confident in what they do and open to discussion. And when the confidence becomes a steel wall, now they're not open to conversation. And that becomes a challenge where true confidence, that's not how you appear. You are open to conversation. You're open to, as you said, you don't act like you know it all. You know what you need to know, and you'll learn what you need to learn to get to that next step.
So I'd like to raise one more question before we bring the podcast to an end. It's always so sad when the podcast comes to an end because we have so much to talk about. But if one of our listeners finishes this episode and thinks, "Oh, that's me," what's the first move?
The first is what they just did, acknowledging that programming within us. We can't rewrite what we aren't aware of. There are some really good books that have been written about this that I think have been very helpful for myself as well as my clients. One of them, and this one may seem a little counterintuitive, is The Speed of Trust. Trusting yourself is one of the first steps needed for confidence. Doesn't mean, that, and yes, this book goes into trusting others as well. It's written by Stephen Covey, so common, someone that we're all very well aware of. Um, and just acting as if in some ways I am confident. I am confident that I've made the right choice for the next step. And then we'll go from there. How about you? What would you recommend to women? And obviously you work with women that are struggling with this at times as well. What do you recommend for them?
I would start by asking three questions. One is, what am I doubting right now? The second question is, what evidence do I already have that I can handle this? And 3 is, what would I do next if I trusted myself just 5% more? Not 100% more, 5%. Why 5%? Because it's doable, right? It keeps it doable. So the first move is not to become fearless. It's to become aware, because once you see the pattern there, then you can interrupt it. Now, maybe that behavior is speaking up once in a meeting. Maybe it's choosing not to over explain this time. Maybe it's asking for that opportunity. Maybe it's accepting the compliment this time. Maybe it's saying, as to your point earlier about clarity, I need a moment to think, instead of panicking because you didn't have an instant answer. I think that confidence grows when you keep promises to yourself in small ways. So the first move is, it's not dramatic. It's not a full reinvention. It's one clean act of self-trust. That's my move. So this wraps our episode of Smart Women Talking. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with a friend, subscribe, and join us next time on our episode of Smart Women Talking.